the emotional impact of Andrew was a little slower to take its toll. At first, the very best in human beings came out. You know, we saw mobile home communities where the people banded together and they gave each other food and they shared their water and they helped each other fix stuff. And then, of course, as time went on, people got more stressed out. You know, if you don't have a roof over your head and you're having to compete for water and stand in line for hours to get food, and you don't know when you're going to contractor, and you haven't seen an insurance adjuster, that stress starts to mount.
Because the impression was wrong in the beginning, because it was suburban, agricultural, South Florida, distant from New York, because communications were knocked out, the people that make the decisions in New York and Washington did not get the message, and that aggravated the situation, made it worse, and that was one of the reasons that the aid was delayed. And it took so long, really, to get help here.
I went up to Broward County and signed leases for many employees who had lost their homes. And for many of them, it wasn't just having a place to go, it was knowing that it was taken care of, because there were so many things they had to take care of in terms of getting a hold of their insurance company, trying to repair a car, taking care of their children, even just getting the basics of food and water. So knowing that they had a place to go and that the company had taken care of that for them was really appreciated.
Well, what I recall mostly, since at the time I was a PTA president, is that a lot of the children were really, really scared. And I remember Halloween of that year, October. It was, you know, a short time, only 2 months after the hurricane, and a lot of children didn't want to celebrate Halloween that year. They didn't want to do anything scary. They wanted Halloween to be more of a happy thing than a scary thing, because they had enough scares. And still, teachers told me about kids having nightmares and not being able to sleep well or concentrate in class. So a lot of that did go on for a long time.
I was really in shock for days. I think my boss, they helped me a lot right after the storm, because I lost everything. I used to live in a mobile home, which when I went back the next day, there was nothing there. The whole park was gone. My family, the person that got more affected by it was my 5-year-old girl. When she got home and she saw all her toys all over the place, she kind of got real upset.
I think what moved me the most was the children in our school. I remember one little girl who lost her Dalmatian, and she sobbed about that dog. And the mom told me, well, I couldn't tell her that he was actually impaled by falling debris from the home.
A very few weeks after Hurricane Andrew, the courts were jammed with domestic cases. The judges didn't have time to handle insurance-related cases. The domestic cases, that kind of devastation takes what is a pretty much stable marriage and can test it tremendously. And many of them were tested, and it caused quite a few divorces and things like that. So it's just the human damage, something like this is impossible to measure.
And some people sought counseling for that, and some people didn't. And I don't care how strong you were, if you didn't have an opportunity to talk with somebody and talk through it, it made a difference.
When I got to the zoo, I'll never forget, one of the first things I saw were these monkeys running across the street in front of the zoo, and they weren't even our monkeys. Right next door to the park is a breeding facility for the University of Miami, where they maintained breeding primates, and those primates were running throughout the area. So it was very, very scary. I couldn't drive my car all the way up to the zoo. I had to park half a mile out in front of the gate and walk because of the destruction was so incredible. I didn't recognize the place. I've been working here over a decade, and I did not recognize the place. And my first feeling was, it's either all dead or it's all out. And to be quite honest with you, my hope was that if it's one or the other, that it was all dead. Because if it was out and these animals were frightened and injured, it was just going to compound the tragedy that the community was already experiencing. Because the last thing they needed now was a bunch of wild, hurt, panicked, dangerous animals running through the community, in a community that really didn't have any homes or any protection, any shelter left, because the hurricane had leveled everything. The first animals born was a giraffe. And it was interesting because it was born into this horribly destroyed landscape, and unanimously the name given to that giraffe was Hope. And it got to represent basically all the hope that we had the zoo would come back. Unfortunately, it proved true.
It hit in the least populated area of the county, which was a godsend. Had that storm come in 20 miles further to the north, or anywhere above that 20-mile north line, the damage and the impacts that we saw that occurred in South Dade was minimal compared to what you would see elsewhere.
If the storm had come 20 miles further north and taken out South Beach, the Port of Miami, the busiest passenger port in the world, the financial district in Miami, the third biggest financial district in the United States, the Coral Gables financial district, and business district, which is the business district for Latin America, the Miami International Airport, the eighth busiest airport in the world. The economic activity of South Florida, no doubt, would be significantly less today than it is. Also, it would have had a tremendous effect on the insurance industry of the United States and the world, even more so than it did, and probably put major insurance companies out of business. And that would have caused probably some economic effect worldwide, with $100 billion at risk in just Dade County. The insurance industry can't handle that, especially couldn't handle that then.
The insurance industry, of course, was overwhelmed with what was going on. The first adjuster they sent over was this rookie guy, bless his heart. He had no concept of what printing equipment was and what he was looking at. So he reports a loss, and the insurance company tells us that they're going to send us a check for $150,000. And we say, okay, well, and that represents 50% of the claim. $110,000 went just to replace a roof. That was the lowest estimate we had at the time to just replace a roof. So, you can imagine $150,000 was not going to go a long way.
I guess you have moments after the storm where, you can be depressed for a while, but you have to try and be optimistic and figure, well, we're going to rebuild things or do something. And so when I was filming for the insurance people, I didn't want it to be a boring documentary, so I thought they'd fall asleep. So I made the comment that thanks to Hurricane Andrew, we had a couple skylights installed by Andrew in the house, and I tried to make some levity out of the situation. When we went outside, I said all the tar paper's gone, the wind has seen to it that it's been taken away, and we don't have to worry about cleaning it up out of the yard because I think it took it to Naples. So we just tried to put some levity in the video because you can only be depressed for so long.
Insurers look at risk totally differently now than they did before Andrew. We still take risk. We still package and remove risk from the general public for a living. That hasn't changed. What's changed is how we assess the risk of damage in a hurricane. Retrospectively, we used to look at 10, 20, 30 years of loss experience in a neighborhood or a county or even a state in order to determine the rates for that risk. With Andrew, we were looking in the rearview mirror while the car went over the cliff, and we can't do that again. We've got to look at exposure as the basis for our price rather than loss experience. When we woke up after Andrew, so to speak, and looked at that exposure and the type of exposure that had accumulated in those regions over the previous abnormally quiet 20 or 30 year period in the meteorological history of the state, we realized that there was a lot of work to be done to manage that risk.
We look back now, and I remember telling people that from my perspective back then that, in 10 years people would be asking not how much are the property taxes, but how much is the insurance, and what's the availability of insurance. And I think we found that that's come true. We've seen rates triple, basically, over this last 10 years. That's been pretty devastating for people to be able to afford that kind of an increase in insurance cost.
After Hurricane Andrew, the governor put together a commission to evaluate what had gone on in Hurricane Andrew, what had gone right, and more numerically, what had gone wrong. And this commission came up with 99 different recommendations for how to improve response. And one of the big things that came out of that was making sure that the federal plan and the state plan and the county plans were the same. So we all adopted the emergency support function concept so that we would be using the same language and talking the same terminology. And it assigned first response type responsibilities to the state and federal government for the first time. So the same agency, the State of Florida Division of Emergency Management, that in Hurricane Andrew didn't feel the need to be in our emergency operations center, did not feel the need to forward deploy and have resources, since Hurricane Andrew has come forward light years. They've truly made great leaps and steps forward. They now pre-deploy prior to impact into any potentially impacted county to act as an information resource back and forth, and more importantly to help counties get what they need. And we even now have a statewide mutual aid agreement and even a nationwide mutual aid agreement to ensure that that kind of impromptu assistance that we were able to give county to county is now more formally recognized and requested and reimbursed down the line.
One of the most astounding and perplexing rumors that we had to deal with was the story that the Florida National Guard was collecting up dead bodies and storing them in reefers or cooling trailers. Now, why people would think that the Florida National Guard was involved picking up these bodies and hiding them in reefers, we'll never know. But it continued for many, many weeks, and we did everything we could, including bringing up any reporter or other person to the cold storage trailers and opening them up and showing them that there were no dead bodies. Why would people think that? This was a terrible tragedy, but it was not a negligent act on the part of the National Guard or the state government or local government. It was something that had happened, and I think that goes back to the fact that we could not believe that there weren't more people killed by this horrendous storm.
We had an attraction in South Florida called the Monkey Jungle, and they had some monkeys that were used for scientific purposes, but for the most part they were an attraction. You could come and see their monkeys and feed their monkeys and play with their monkeys. And in spite of their best efforts to secure the Monkey Jungle prior to Hurricane Andrew hitting, of course, they had infrastructure damage and cages damaged, and we had monkeys get loose. Well, a rumor got started that these monkeys were being used in a test laboratory for AIDS testing. And that rumor just got passed on so fast, like a wildfire spreading through the community, that these monkeys had AIDS. Well, and of course now the monkeys are just roaming the neighborhoods freely as they've escaped from the monkey jungle. And these same citizens who felt it necessary to be armed to protect their property decided that it was their responsibility to go out and kill these AIDS-infected monkeys. So it essentially became open season on any monkey that could be found in the area. And many monkeys were killed who were just essentially pets.